Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and I'm probably best known for the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Way back in 1997, I published this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said three things that got me in a lot of trouble. One was that the rich don't work for money. Number two is your house is not an asset. And number three, savers would be losers. So that was in 1997, and look at what happened in 2007. The real estate market crashed, the government started printing money called quantitative easing, and savers became losers. It was me on CNN with Wolf Blitzer looking like a complete idiot, making a prediction on the coming crash.
If people start pulling out of the markets in their 50s, in their early 60s, and not having that sort of exposure, we are never going to get to a point where our money lasts as long as we need it to. We need to be participants in this system into our 70s and into our 80s, and then we need a plan for withdrawing those assets, just like we needed a plan for putting those assets in.
Yes, and you're putting those assets into those investment bankers that are in financial trouble today. And all I'm saying is, aren't these guys supposed to be the smartest guys on earth? And shouldn't we be careful who we take financial advice from, including the four of us on this panel?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of bad advice.
But Robert, you're really that worried about Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers?
Yes. I'm afraid the Federal Reserve will eventually or come close to bailing them out. That's what I'm concerned about. And that young lady who says the taxpayers are not in trouble, who's going to pay for that bailout again as the taxpayer?
Lehman Brothers says it plans to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
The collapse of Lehman Brothers.
Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Hundreds of bailed out banks are still struggling to repay taxpayers.
It's no secret that the California housing bubble has popped with hardships spread wide. Real estate expert Robert Kiyosaki predicted all of this would happen back in 2005, but most people didn't listen.
It's the biggest financial bubble in the history of the world.
Hoping this wasn't inevitable, but we have had a big jump in foreclosure filings. Let me tell you a little about this. There are 650,000 homes in the United States in foreclosure right now.
U.S. foreclosure activity jumped 81% in 2008. With
10 million people lost their homes to foreclosure and were forced out onto the streets.
It goes back to why don't we have financial education in our schools? You see, it was in 1997 that Rich Dad, Poor Dad first came up, and I said some things in Rich Dad, Poor Dad that was, you don't know what you're talking about. But since then, most of what I said in Rich Dad, Poor Dad has come true. Number one, I said your house is not an asset. And as you know, in 2005 and 2007, the housing market crashed. I also said that savers were losers. And as the housing market crashed, interest rates came down. So people are saving money today and they're losing. Why would you save money when the federal government and the central banks and Wall Street are printing money? So let me tell you what's different about Rich Dad, Poor Dad in case you don't know. Number one, as you know, there's a lot of poor people. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad was not written for poor people. Nothing's wrong with them and all that. You want to be poor, it's up to you. I didn't want to be poor, okay? And number two, there's the middle class. There's a lot of them. But as you know today, 20 years later, the middle class is being hollowed out. There's no such thing as job security. Pay raises haven't gone up for the middle class. Technology is replacing people like driverless cars, artificial intelligence, and globalization. Jobs are moving overseas. So to be middle class today, it's very, very dangerous. So what makes Rich Dad different is we focus here. And if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, nothing's changed. And it's what the rich teach their kids about money that the poor and middle class do not teach. So what makes Rich Dad different is we teach what the rich teach. The book Rich Dad, Poor Dad says the same, but what has changed is the history around the book. The economy has gone through ups and downs. We're in a huge boom right now, and people have actually gotten poorer. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 20th anniversary edition is the same book, but it's about what has really happened in the last 20 years. As you know, my poor dad was a PhD in education, but what does school teach you about money? Did you learn anything about money at school? Most people don't. So that's why I had my rich dad, who was my best friend's father, and he was teaching me what the rich teach me. So look, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be poor, I hate to say this, you can go to school, but you still won't learn anything about money. And education is more important today, but what do you learn about money? Most kids now going to school, they're coming out of school deeply in debt with student loans, still not learning anything about money. Look at the middle class. You know, they may have high-paying jobs, but the jobs are going away. And what makes Rich Dad different is we teach what the rich teach people. So ladies and gentlemen, make a decision where you want to be. If you're poor, and nothing wrong with being poor, because I've been poor once or twice, is your teacher, if you're poor, is Susie Orman. She's a great person. She'll tell you to cut up your credit cards and live below your means. For poor people, great financial advice. I personally don't like living below my means, and I love my credit cards. And if you're middle class, that's Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey's a good friend of mine, and he always says, live debt-free. That's not what I do. I love debt. See, if you're going to be rich, you have to learn how to use debt as money. That's what President Trump does. He's the king of debt, as he says. I know some of you don't like him, but he's a rich man who understands debt. So there's Dave Ramsey in here. There's also Tony Robbins, is very, very middle class. He talks about buying ETFs. So if you like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, saving money, that's here. That's not Rich Dad. What Rich Dad teaches people are people who want to be rich. I don't cut up my credit cards. I don't save money, and I don't invest in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And I don't invest for the long term. We do everything different. Why the rich are getting richer and why Rich Dad is more appropriate today is because this comes from our second book, which is the cash flow quadrant. And the cash flow quadrant is about the 4 people that make up the world of business. E stands for employees. S stands for self-employed, small business guys, doctors, lawyers, and specialists. You know, they're self-employed. They work by themselves. And B stands for big business, 500 employees or more. And I stands for professional investor. These guys are passive investors. They invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and save money. These guys are entrepreneurs. They're like the people on Shark Tank, you know, Mark Cuban and those guys. So these are professional investors. These guys are passive investors. So people who buy ETFs, mutual funds, 401ks, IRAs, they're on this side. Okay. So very simply, this was my poor dad, and he always said, go to school, get a job. And my rich dad said, come over here and be a professional investor. So today I'm over here. Look, let me tell you one of the reasons the rich are getting richer or the poor are getting poor is very simply because it goes to taxes. Who pays the highest taxes? Well, all over the world, not just the U.S., these people pay approximately 40% in tax. Why would you go to school to pay 40% in tax? Doesn't make sense. You know, shouldn't financial education teach you how to pay less tax? And if you're a self-employed or a small entrepreneur or a doctor or a lawyer, you pay the highest taxes of all, 60%. So many people today are quitting their jobs and becoming entrepreneurs here only to pay more taxes. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't to me. But if that's what you like, you know, stay here. These people over here, these are like Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. They pay 20% in tax. They have over 500 employees. This is where I'm at today. And in the rich dad world, 0% taxes, legally. You see, on this side, you don't need financial education. Just go to school, and you don't learn anything about money. You work hard, you pay higher taxes. Rich dad education, rich dad coaching is on this side here. You need financial education to make it here. You're happy staying here? That's your choice. Again, this is Tony Robbins, Dave Ramsey, and Susie Orman. This is where you're at. Buy mutual funds, ETFs, and those things. Over here is where the rich are at. So Rich Dad teaches this side of it. And you must have financial education over here. You don't need it over here, but you must have it over here. So what makes Rich Dad different is we teach people to move to this side. This is the good news. You can keep your job and still move here. You can be in two places. And you can be self-employed or a small business or a doctor or a lawyer, and you can still come here or here. So that's the difference between Rich Dad and the poor and middle class, is that because it takes financial education to move to this side, namely debt and taxes. A person like me uses debt and taxes to get rich. I don't save money. Which brings up to my point here, why savers are losers. See, Dave Ramsey says get out of debt, which is smart if you have no financial education. But if you want to get really rich, you must learn how to use debt. Give an example why savers are losers. Is after 1971, President Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard and he could print money. Now, why would you save money when the governments of the world, the banks and all that, are printing money? It makes no sense. And after the stock market crashed in 2008, the US government really started printing money, but so did the rest of the world. So savers are the biggest losers. You know, back around 1970, if I had $1 million, I got 15% interest. Okay? Look at it today, I'm lucky to get 2% interest. So why would you save money when the government's printing money? Look at what's happening to the interest rates being paid to savers. And the governments are still printing money. So one of the worst things that's happening is that if you're poor, they're telling you to save money, and you're only going to get poorer. And if you're middle class, look at this. They're telling you to save money in the stock market. Look at the stock market is an all-time high. Look at the crash of 1929. That was a giant crash. This next crash is going to be huge. So all the savers in their 401ks and mutual funds, possibly, hopefully not, will get wiped out. Why save? Learn to invest. So this is why savers are losers. And it went all the way back to 1971 when President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard and the United States started to print money. And that's why savers are losers. What makes Rich Dad education and coaching different than all the other people? For example, again, I don't say to save money, but if you want to, you can. I don't say invest for the long term in the stock market. If you want to, you can. That's not what we do. And I definitely don't like cutting up my credit cards because I love my credit cards. But I think I want to talk about something called fear. We all have fear. And if you have no financial education, because our schools, even like my poor dad with a PhD, he had no financial education. So naturally he was afraid. You know, if you look at a baby learning to walk, a baby, stands up and falls down. Baby makes a mistake, cries, stands up, falls down. Cries, stands up, falls down. But you go to school, they punish you. Oh, you made a mistake. You're stupid. And that's why so many people leave school highly educated, like my poor dad with a PhD, but they're so afraid. They're so afraid of making mistakes and losing money and all that. And so they just blindly turn their money over to the government in taxes, or they give their money to Wall Street to invest for the long term for them, or they go to the bank and they save their money for them. The price of fear is very, very high, and it's understandable because I have the same fear everybody else does. The difference is you need to learn to make mistakes, fall down, and learn again. Learn, run, so that's how you learn. You don't learn by not making mistakes. So this was the core of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And this is a very simple, childish example of a financial statement. This is the basis of financial literacy. And this here is income. This is expense. This is asset. And this is liability. Very simple, okay? So for those who read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you know that what assets do is they put money in your pocket. And a liability like your house takes money from your pocket. It's that simple. So one of the reasons the rich are getting richer is the rich work for assets and the poor middle class work for liabilities like houses, cars, college education, credit cards and stuff like that. Another point of difference in the financial statement here. This is my poor dad, and he wanted me to get a high-paying job. And this is my rich dad here, and he says, learn to acquire assets. So the reason I'm a rich man is I had a lot of assets. It's not that I never lost, I made mistakes and things like this, but I knew my job was to acquire assets. So this is the basis of financial literacy or financial intelligence. It's a financial statement. Another thing my rich dad taught me was, this is what your banker wants to see. When you go to the banker and you say, I want to borrow some money, they want to see a financial statement. 95% of all people leaving school have no idea what a financial statement is. That's why they're so afraid. That's why they go to the bank and they shake. Well, the bank turns me down. And banks have turned me down too. But this here is the basis of financial literacy, financial intelligence. And this is the rich dad company, okay? What other people are saying all the time, the reason they're getting poor, you go to school, you get a job, first thing that happens, taxes. People who have job, taxes go out, and this goes to our government. And you know, they spend our money wisely, right? And then you buy a house or a car, and you call it an asset when it's really a liability. So the money flows out this way through debt, bad debt, to the bank. So your banker loves it for people who are not financially educated. They love giving you credit cards. Nothing wrong with the credit cards, you just don't know how to use them. And then if you're going to invest for the long term and for your retirement plan or something like this money goes here in the form of investments, and this money goes to Wall Street. So one of the reasons the rich are getting richer and the poor middle class are not is because without financial education, because of fear of making mistakes, the fear of being broke or whatever, then the legitimate fears. Your money is, first of all, going to the government through taxes, going to the banks through bad debt, and number 4 is that you're giving your money to Wall Street to invest for you. That's not what the rich do. So to teach people to do this, we have our cash flow game here. This game is Monopoly on steroids. It's very similar to Monopoly. I learned a lot about getting rich playing Monopoly from my rich dad. But what makes the cash flow game different is this here. If you learn to understand the financial statement, playing the cash flow game, making your mistakes in a game like playing Monopoly, making your mistakes with playing money, you're not as afraid of making mistakes. And if you're going to live your life in fear and just being poor or middle class, then this is what's going to happen to your money. It's going to be gone anyway. So be smart, you know. Invest sometimes in a cash flow game. There's cash flow clubs all over the world. You can practice. You don't have to cost any money. But you need to invest in your brain, your financial education. There'll always be fear. And you'll always make mistakes because that's real life. But this is what your banker wants to see. This is your report card when you grow up. My rich dad always said, my bankers never once asked me my report card, never asked me my grade point average, never asked me what college I went to. Your banker wants to see this. And 95% of the people leaving school, people like my poor dad with a PhD, they don't have one of these. That's why they're fearful all the time. Look, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to make mistakes like a baby's got to make mistakes before it learns to walk. If you're going to learn to be an investor and make a lot of money, use a cash flow game, make mistakes using play money. And you'll find your fear going down and your confidence going up. There's no guarantees, but at least you'll know the object of life is to get here, to acquire assets. You know, like in Monopoly, it's 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. My wife and I have a lot of houses, a lot of hotels. We don't have stocks and bonds, but we have oil wells, we have things like, we have businesses. But this is what to make the rich richer is here. And our schools teach us to go to school and get a job. And the moment you do that, taxes go to the government, debt goes to the bank, and your investments go to Wall Street. And that's why the rich are getting richer.